Hello, YouTubers. Welcome to the Fantasy Football Today post Thursday Night Football Q&A. I'm Chris Towers. I'm going to be here, let's say, until midnight, maybe a little afterwards for those of you on the East Coast like me. It's 11:30 now, so you can do the math. That's about half an hour of me answering your questions live. Make sure you drop them in the chat. Make sure you hit us with a like and a subscribe for more fantasy football coverage. We've got all kinds of stuff going on during the week. We got, Fantasy Football Today podcast recording Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. We got stream on Tuesday night at 8 p.m. We got a stream on Thursday afternoon at 2 p.m. We got this stream 11:30-ish whenever the Thursday night football game ends. We got a stream on Sunday morning to help you set your lineup. So we got all kinds of stuff right here on the Fantasy Football Today YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you like this stream. And I'm going to answer some questions for the next half hour. If you missed it, you can check out the episode of Fantasy Football Today in 5 on the YouTube channel that I just recorded that talks about the Thursday night game. And obviously, Tua Tagovailoa's injury in that one was the big headline. Scary stuff is he was tackled hard, hit his head on the ground, and seemed to be a little out of it. He was taken to the hospital. The good news is he's going to be released from the hospital. And, obviously there's no point in speculating beyond that. It was a scary situation. It was one of those plays that just, it was tough to watch, the replays and all that. It was an ugly situation. And, Teddy Bridgewater, given the circumstances, I thought played okay. There was the one bad interception where, him and Mike Gesicki didn't seem to be on the same page. That'll happen when you don't get any first team reps with the first team offense like Teddy Bridgewater did over the course of training camp and through the first 3 weeks of the season. But, he looked okay. The Dolphins offense, they just struggled to close drives off. And that was even true before Teddy Bridgewater's in the game. They went 2 for 10 on third down. They settled for 3 field goals. Bengals offense, I thought looked really good. And that was what I hoped to see against the Dolphins defense that is very aggressive, very blitz heavy, and they were able to make them pay. It wasn't so much Jamar Chase. He did have the one, a couple of longer plays, 136-yarder late in the game to kind of seal it for the Bengals. But he had 4 catches on six targets for 81 yards. T. Higgins, once again, though, was the best Bengals receiver. And that's kind of been true 2 out of the 4 games. And really, since he left one of those games early, 2 out of the 3 games that T. Higgins has played, he has looked like, I don't want to say the better receiver or the number 1 receiver or anything like that. He's a 1B to Jamar Chase's 1A, and Higgins, arguably because he's not quite so downfield oriented, might see more targets, at least some weeks like he has the last couple. So T. Higgins, really good player, top 12 wide receiver for me rest of the season. He's awesome. Let's get to some of these questions. Yeah, T. Higgins, wide receiver 1 status. I had him as a top 12 wide receiver coming into the season. So, I've got a little bit of confirmation bias here, but he's just an awesome, awesome player. He's really he's a good deep play guy. He's not Jamar Chase in that regard, but, he might be a little better in terms of, beating physical contact coverage and moving the chains, whereas Chase is more of the deep play guy. So, I really like the way T. Higgins is playing right now. As long as he's able to stay healthy, he did deal with a concussion, left the game last week with, it was hard to see what exactly happened. He might have had, I think he was listed on the injury report with like a foot injury or something, but he did take a hard hit to the head. So, a little concerning there, but as long as he's healthy, he looks like a must start fantasy wide receiver. PPR league, would I trade Davante Adams for either Khalil Herbert or James Robinson? Absolutely not. I need a lot more than that. I'm still viewing Davante Adams as a top 5 wide receiver, top 10 wide receiver for sure. The targets have been there. His target share, I think the concern with him going to Las Vegas, it wasn't the only concern, but one of the concerns was that he wasn't going to get funneled targets the way he had in Green Bay. Well, he's got a 29% target share. The problem so far is he's only caught 50% of the passes thrown from Derek Carr. Say what you want about Derek Carr, but accuracy is not really his issue. His issue is, not necessarily being willing to take deep shots, not necessarily being willing to take the deep plays when they're there. I think Davante Adams is going to be just fine. They're making him a focal point in the offense all over the field, including the red zone. I'm still viewing him as a top 10 guy. Khalil Herbert, no way. I mean, I expect him to be good with David Montgomery out, and maybe he can be the number one running back. But when Montgomery was healthy, it wasn't even close. I mean, it was Montgomery playing 2/3 of the snaps to Herbert. So I definitely wouldn't do that. And James Robinson, I just don't think he's good enough for Davante Adams personally. Let's see. James Conner, Miles Sanders, Mac Hollins, or DJ Moore. Choose one. God, do we think we're going to be here with DJ Moore in week 4? If you listen to Fantasy Football Today in 5, you know I am not the guy who's going to give up on DJ Moore just yet. So I'm still rolling with him. I'm not treating DJ Moore like I was coming into the season where he was a top 12 wide receiver. He's more like a wide receiver 3 for me, but I'm not willing to admit defeat yet. If, however, you are a more reasonable and potentially intelligent person than me, and you don't want to start DJ Moore, which I completely understand, then I would go with James Conner here. And even honestly, maybe James Conner over DJ Moore just in general. You know, I focus so much on the DJ Moore part of it, but James Conner, he didn't look 100% healthy last week, but I like the passing game role that he's had. You know, the Carolina matchup, it's not great, but it's not one that I'm totally scared off of. So actually, having said all that, James Conner over DJ Moore. But DJ Moore is a wide receiver 3, so I'm not giving up on him. Hey, Chris, would you accept this deal from Angry Tacos? Hello, Angry Tacos. Why are the tacos angry? Tacos should be happy. I guess they're going to be eaten. Maybe they wouldn't be happy about that. But, you know, a taco lives to be eaten, right? The taco doesn't exist unless it's going to be eaten. So cheer up, tacos. Trade away A.J. Brown and Dameon Pierce for Justin Jefferson. I think that's fine. You know, Dameon Pierce I think he's a fine RB2, but I don't think there's much upside there. A.J. Brown is very, very good, but he's not Justin Jefferson, probably. You know, what we've seen the last couple of weeks, well, maybe Justin Jefferson, you know, might not be as good for fantasy as we thought he would be. That's a hypothetical. I actually do think Justin Jefferson is going to be just as good as we thought he was. I still have him as he's my number 3 wide receiver this week, but that's not really a knock on him. That's Stephon Diggs and Cooper Kupp are really, really good, you know. But I think Justin Jefferson is absolutely still a superstar level player. I think he's going to be very good moving forward. It is sort of a tough matchup this week against New Orleans. You know, Marshawn Lattimore, I don't know if he's going to follow Justin Jefferson around the field, but Marshawn Lattimore, if you just ask Mike Evans, is a pretty tough guy. And he's a tough matchup who can frustrate even very good wide receivers. So there's a little bit of concern there in the short term, but I think Justin Jefferson is going to be just fine. So I think it's an okay deal. It's not a slam dunk, but it's not an obvious, you know, miss, I guess. Hi. I traded away Antonio Gibson and Jalen Waddle to get Joe Mixon before the game tonight in non-PPR scoring. Okay trade. My other running backs are Kamara and Breece Hall. So I do think you needed another running back, and Joe Mixon, I mean, historically has been more of a non-PPR than a PPR guy, but he's actually been very heavily involved in this passing game so far. 4 more catches today. Got into the end zone finally. I think there was some concern there, but there shouldn't have been because he's still in a very good offense. He's still the clear number 1. So in a non-PPR format, I think Mixon is a top 12-ish player. Gibson and Waddle for him, it's a fair trade. You know, Waddle, assuming he's healthy, you know, moving forward, because he was seemingly limited in this game, only had the 2 catches. Assuming Waddle's fine moving forward, I think he's going to be very, very good. But Gibson seems pretty iffy at this point, especially in a non-PPR league, because I think the best case you can make for him moving forward is that Brian Robinson's return makes Gibson more of the passing downs back, and even that's not a guarantee. So I think it's fine to make this trade. How much league media controversy will there be over Tua not getting into the concussion protocol that last week and then this secondary injury this week? Look, it was scary stuff, especially seeing the way he reacted to that hit in week 3. The thing is, I don't think, there's a lot of like, I think sort of unfair, the Dolphins didn't go through the proper protocols, or maybe the protocols aren't robust enough. I think part of the problem is concussions are difficult to diagnose because injuries don't often present the same way. They don't always come, in the same time frame. So it's really hard. It's not just an NFL problem. I remember there were a couple of situations with the Golden State Warriors in the playoffs a few years ago where Klay Thompson and Harrison Barnes both took shots to the head, were cleared to play, and then later on showed symptoms. So, I think concussions are just really difficult, and that's not to make excuses, but it's to say that I don't know if I'm qualified to say that Tua Tagovailoa. I'm definitely not qualified to say Tua Tagovailoa shouldn't have been out there today. That's not my place to say. Obviously, it was a scary situation, and I just hope he's okay. I think there's going to be a lot of scrutiny for the Dolphins, and rightly so. But we'll see whatever comes out from the various investigations that should happen. It would be irresponsible for there not to be investigations into what happened. But I just hope he's okay. Thankfully, he's being released from the hospital tonight. He's traveling home with the team. So, hopefully he's okay. That's the biggest thing for me. Need two: Curtis Samuel, Tyler Lockett, and Rashad Bateman. I would sit Lockett among this group, but I think he's an okay player. I've got him 30th at wide receiver, so that's actually, I'm looking at it. I do have Rashad Bateman ranked lower than Tyler Lockett, which it might be weird to say I'm surprised by my own ranking, but hey, this happens. There's a lot of players that you're ranking, and you don't know where all of them are relative to all of the other ones all of the time. But I think that makes sense, which you would hope it would make sense to me since it's my ranking. But, Lockett's been a big time target getter from Geno Smith. And it's not just the small sample size this season, but even going back to last season, the 4 games that Geno Smith started, Tyler Lockett had a 28% target share from Geno Smith. He's not as downfield oriented as DK Metcalf. So it seems like Geno Smith looks his way a little more. Whereas Rashad Bateman, I really like Rashad Bateman. I think he's a very good player, but the Ravens aren't playing him anywhere close to 100% of their snaps, not even 100% of their routes. And he's been very, very big play dependent. Now, Lamar Jackson is playing maybe the best football of his career, especially as a passer, and that's been enough to get Rashad Bateman to respectable or better production every week. But there are going to be stretches when you don't get a 50-yard catch every week. And when that happens, Rashad Bateman could be pretty disappointing. So I think Curtis Samuel's the clear number 1 out of this 3, and I would go with Lockett over Bateman. I got A.J. Brown for Devontae Smith and Zach Ertz. Did I win? Yeah, I think so. It depends on what else you have at tight end. I don't think Zach Ertz is great, but there are like 2 good tight ends, maybe 3, probably. And then everyone else is pretty bad. And Zach Ertz is somewhere between good and bad, which makes him a top 12 tight end moving forward. So if you're relying on someone like Tyler Conklin, I think it could be a little iffy because Devontae Smith looks great. He looks like a serious playmaker who I think we all just overlooked a little too much because as good as A.J. Brown is, they're still, they're throwing the ball 30 times plus per game, which is what we wanted to see. And that's going to give Devontae Smith enough room to hit on some big plays and still be pretty good. So I think it's a good trade, but, not an A+ necessarily. By the way, if you're not always listening to Fantasy Football Today, the trade grade thing is F is you lose, A is you win, C is it's a fair trade. I would say the A.J. Brown for Devontae Smith and Zach Ertz is like a B. So it's a win. It's not a blowout. What do I think about this trade? Stafford plus Devontae Adams plus James Conner for Josh Allen, Gabe Davis, and Kareem Hunt. That's really tough because Josh Allen is, with Lamar Jackson and maybe Jalen Hurts and Patrick Mahomes, the arguably the biggest edge you can get in fantasy right now because quarterback just has not been as good as we thought it would be. Offense is down around the league, despite passing being up. So typically, I think most fantasy analysts would probably look at getting a big upgrade at quarterback as not necessarily as big of a deal. But I think it is a pretty big deal here. That being said, I think the Adams, I think, is a first round pick, or first round caliber player. James Conner, probably more like a second or third rounder, but I like the passing game role that we've seen from him. So I would say that the Stafford, Adams, Conner side wins this trade, but it's again not a huge win. What level running back should I look to get for Juju? I have Kamara, Swift, Michael Carter, and Darrell Henderson. Okay, so you do need a running back. I feel pretty good about Alvin Kamara. I might be on an island a little bit there, but I think he's going to be fine. 15 carries, 7 targets in week 3. I know there's some concern about whether Alvin Kamara fits with Jameis Winston and whether Jameis Winston's too inaccurate, but Kamara caught 76% of his passes from Jameis Winston last year. I think he's going to be fine moving forward. But with the Swift injury and with Carter Carter and Henderson splitting carries and snaps, more importantly, I do think you could use an upgrade. But in terms of what you could get for Juju, I don't think the perception is that Juju is super valuable. So I'm going to go check Dave Richards' trade values chart on CBSSports.com and see what he has to say. So he's got Juju Smith as a 9-point or dollar player in PPR. So he's got like Khalil Herbert, Kareem Hunt, Jeff Wilson, Melvin Gordon, Devin Singletary, that kind of range. I would see if you could get Cam Akers for him. Or even you probably can't afford David Montgomery because you've already got the Swift injury. That's unfortunate. So I would see if you get Cam Akers. I would see if you get Ezekiel Elliott and maybe throw something in for him. I don't think Elliott's going to be a superstar, but he should be pretty good. Tacos can have rage too. Thanks for answering the question. I mean, you put enough hot sauce, I guess, that would make them a little angry. What's this do to Waddle's fantasy outlook? I assume you mean the Tua Tagovailoa injury. It wouldn't be good. I don't think you should look at Jalen Waddle not having a good game today with anything like concern. He only had 2 catches for 39 yards, but like I said earlier, he was dealing with that groin injury in practice. I don't think that's a long-term issue, so hopefully, he'll be fine moving forward. I'm just going to go ahead and hit the retweet button on my tweet for this to get this out in front of more people because I want more questions. James Conner or Cordero Patterson the rest of the season? I'm going with James Conner the rest of the season. Patterson, the Falcons seem to view his usage in a very binary way. When they feel like they don't need him in the running game, they'll use him in the passing game. When they use him in the running game heavily, like they have in week 1 and week 2, they don't really use him much in the passing game. And that's a concern because I don't think you can just count on him continuing to run for 100 yards when he's getting a heavy usage. This is still a mediocre offense. He's not, I think he's a good running back, actually. He's a pretty good rusher, but you're the way he's used, in those games where he's getting a lot of carries, it's very like Nick Chubb-esque, but he's not, running behind the Browns offensive line. He's not Nick Chubb as a player. I don't think that's unfair. So I think James Conner's the better bet. Full PPR, would you trade Dallas Goedert and Scarence Terrace for Kyle Pitts and Garrett Wilson? Yes, I have Kyle Pitts ranked higher than Dallas Goedert rest of season, and I might have Garrett Wilson ranked ahead of Terry McLaurin. And the only thing is, and this is not, Jamie and I talked about this on the 2:00 stream on the YouTube channel, which you're watching right now. Make sure you hit the like and subscribe buttons. The thing we talked about with Garrett Wilson is, with Zach Wilson coming back from his injury, there's kind of a back and forth going on fantasy Twitter with like, Elijah Moore is going to benefit from Zach Wilson being back. Or, the comeback to that would be, well, didn't we say that Zach Wilson was holding Elijah Moore back last year? I think a lot of people would have said that. I don't think Elijah Moore is going to be Zach Wilson's favorite target. I'm not necessarily saying that. I'm not necessarily saying that Garrett Wilson isn't going to get a lot of targets from Zach Wilson. The only thing for me is what we've seen the first 3 weeks of the season is a Jets offense that's been run by Joe Flacco, which is just, he's a different player than Zach Wilson, different tendencies, different approach to the game, all that stuff. And two, it's been an incredibly pass-heavy offense. They're averaging 50-plus pass attempts per game. I don't think that's going to be the case with Zach Wilson. I think they're going to try to be a little more balanced than they have been. And so we can't say that they're going to have as much overall volume. We can't necessarily say that Garrett Wilson is going to get the same target share that he has been from Joe Flacco, just because Zach Wilson's a different player. So it's not an Elijah Moore is better than Garrett Wilson. It's not an Elijah Moore is going to benefit from Zach Wilson being back. It's just that we're getting a reset on this offense now. What we've seen for the first 3 games, that matters, but it's less important than it otherwise would be. And so there is a chance that Garrett Wilson isn't quite as effective for a number of factors. Fewer pass attempts overall. Zach Wilson doesn't look his way as much. But that being said, I think Garrett Wilson's a superstar, or at least a potential superstar. He has every look about him of a superstar. I think Kyle Pitts is better than Dallas Goedert. So yes, I would do this trade. Garrett Wilson or Mr. Cummings' favorite boy. I'm assuming that's DJ Moore, who is Mr. Cummings' favorite player. And I would go with Garrett Wilson ahead of DJ Moore. Like I said earlier, I'm not giving up on DJ Moore yet, but I've got Garrett Wilson ranked. Oh, okay. Now, see, this is another one where I look at my rankings and I don't agree with myself. I've got DJ Moore 1 spot ahead of Garrett Wilson. I'm going to move Garrett Wilson 1 spot ahead of DJ Moore. How about that? In real time. What do I do with whack Dolphins wide receivers? What? Terry had 10 catches for 160 yards today. Jalen Waddle had 342 yards coming into today's game, and he wasn't healthy. Don't overreact. Come on, guys. This is the most overreactions happen on Thursday, Monday, and Sunday night because it's the Island game. It's the only thing everyone's looking at. And if a guy has a bad game in one of those Island games, people freak out. Don't freak out. Calm down, guys. I'm clutch for this one. Thank you. Let's see. Just went against Tyreek Hill, so I'm starting off down 25. Full PPR, Hollywood, London, or Robinson. So you couldn't come up with a city for the third guy? I don't know which Robinson that is. I'm going to guess it's James Robinson. So Hollywood Brown, Drake London, or James Robinson in your flex. You're starting Cortland Sutton, A.J. Brown, Austin Eckler, and Leonard Fournette already. Your starters are locked in. Those guys are good. I'm not going to consider any of those guys. I would go with Hollywood Brown over Drake London and James Robinson. Let's see. Starting Jamar Chase and Christian Kirk with Mike Williams, DJ Moore, and Chris Godwin on the bench. Should I drop DJ Moore for Chris Olave? That's a really hard question for me to answer. And I wish I could give you a solid answer because that's what you want. You want me to tell you what to do. And I really like Chris Olave. I love what we've seen from him so far. His downfield playmaking ability has been incredibly valuable for the New Orleans Saints. He has been Jameis Winston's number 1 option. Yes, there has been times when Michael Thomas and Jarvis Landry haven't been playing, and that helped him in week 3 in particular. But as we saw in week 2, Mike Thomas and Jarvis Landry were healthy, and Chris Olave had the 3rd most air yards in a game since the stat was started to be tracked in the early 2000s. So there is a hugely valuable role for him in this New Orleans Saints offense. And then he followed that up with a big performance, turning potential into production. What's the potential energy into kinetic energy? It's been a while since I've taken a science class, but I think that's the way that works. So I really love Chris Olave. And if DJ Moore is the only player you can drop to get him, you might have to do it. But I really love DJ Moore's potential as well. And I know that so far has been dumb and has made me look bad and has caused Heath Cummings an unbelievable amount of stress to the point where we have received multiple emails from our listeners telling him to not beat himself up over it, which is very nice. Thank you, guys. But yeah, DJ Moore's been bad. And this Panthers offense, I can't point to anything with this Panthers offense to say, here's a reason for optimism. Everything about it looks bad. Baker Mayfield looks bad. The play calling looks bad. The wide receivers haven't been great. But I can't give up on a player with DJ Moore's track record. A young player with his kind of production, even with bad quarterback play. We've seen him be very good with bad quarterback play. I'm going to ask one question of you guys for the remainder of the stream. And I said I was going to go till midnight. We'll say 12:15, 12:10, something like that. Don't spam your questions. I'm looking at one that you just hit the button one time. I'm going through them. I'll try to get to them. I can't promise anything. But spamming doesn't necessarily help. In fact, it might make me act a little more spiteful and choose to not answer your question because of that. So just putting that out there. Cordero Patterson or Curtis Samuel for this week. I really like both of them. Cordero Patterson is my number 20 running back, and Curtis Samuel is my number 24 wide receiver, but I would have Curtis Samuel ranked ahead of him in a flex context. Trade Hollywood Brown and Dameon Pierce for Austin Eckler in half-point PPR. Even in half-point PPR, I think this is a great trade. Dameon Pierce, I just don't think he has top 12 upside at running back, and that's what you're looking for. Like, it's nice to have – you need a number 2 running back, right? You start 2 running backs, you need a number 2. And Dameon Pierce should be a decent one, but I don't think he's got a path to being a true impact player, someone who averages 17 PPR points per game or 15 half PPR points, whatever threshold you want to set. Austin Eckler obviously does. And I'm not concerned about the lack of touchdowns so far because his snap share, both inside the 10-yard line and inside the 5-yard line so far, is very similar to what it was last season. It might actually even be slightly higher. To have to check that. But yes, it's been I think Austin Eckler is going to be just fine. Got a couple let's not enough likes. Hit that like button. Hit the like button. It's this little guy right under the video. Just, it makes me feel good. Thanks, Chris. How do we sign up for your newsletter? Well, right here. If you've got the QR code, you can just scan that and it'll take you to the newsletter page, or you can go to cbssports.com/newsletter/fantasy football today. Subscribe to the Fantasy Football Today newsletter. I think it's great. A lot of interesting and useful stuff in there. I'm working on, once this is done, I'm going to go back and finish up my game previews for week 4, where I give you the injury report for every game. I give you toughest lineup decision for every game. I give you, some other analysis, and it's great. 7-ish editions a week, maybe 8. I can't exactly keep track of it at this point. It's a lot. Monday morning, Tuesday morning, Wednesday morning, Wednesday night, Thursday morning, Friday morning, Sunday morning, Sunday night. So that's 7 or 8, something like that. So subscribe, fantasyfootballtoday.com or cbssports.com/newsletters. Yeah. Flex Christian Kirk or Courtland Sutton this week. Well, both should be in your starting lineup. If they're not, you've got a really good team unless you're starting someone bad over them, and you shouldn't do that. I've got Christian Kirk 1 spot ahead of Courtland Sutton. They are both top 20 wide receivers for me. Do I think Michael Pittman will finish top 10 in PPR? No, I don't think he'll finish top 10 in PPR, but that is not a knock on Michael Pittman. It's just that Cooper Kupp, Stephon Diggs, I'll show the tracking. Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Devontae Adams, Deebo Samuel, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Tyreek Hill, A.J. Brown. Then you get Keenan Allen, T. Higgins, Jalen Waddle, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, rest of the season. I think Pittman's in that last group. Higgins, Allen, Waddle, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. Top 15 for sure. But not necessarily top 10. And I will say Matt Ryan, he might just be this year's Ben Roethlisberger, where he might just be done. And the Colts made a bet that he was going to be an improvement on Carson Wentz. So far, that bet looks like a mistake because he has been sacked 12 times in 3 games, I believe. He's fumbled 7 times. He's been picked off 4 times. He just doesn't look good. So, yeah, that Matt Ryan might not be the upgrade we thought he was over Carson Wentz, and that is not to praise Carson Wentz. Trade DJ Moore for Adam Thielen or A.J. Dillon. I don't see much reason to trade him for Adam Thielen. Adam Thielen at this point, if he doesn't get a touchdown, I'm not sure he's going to do much for you. Adam had a stat the other day. It's something like a quarter of his games since the start of the 2020 season, he's had more than 50 yards or something. It's wild. I'm not sure exactly what the number is, and don't quote me on that. But yeah, he hasn't been productive outside of touchdowns. Obviously, touchdowns have been great. But when he doesn't score a touchdown, Adam Thielen's going to be pretty bad. Granted, DJ Moore's just been bad. And so if you wanted to trade him for A.J. Dillon, I think that's okay because Dillon, one, the positional scarcity argument at running back, two, the upside in case anything happens to Aaron Jones. If you could get A.J. Dillon for DJ Moore, I think I would do that. Whew, boy, that's Jimmy Garoppolo or Geno Smith for this week. Gross. I do have Jimmy Garoppolo ranked a little higher, so I guess Jimmy G. Thoughts on sitting Matt Stafford and picking up Trevor Lawrence this week? I got Trevor Lawrence ranked 12th at quarterback, so that's ahead of Matthew Stafford, who is 16th. So, yeah, I think that's fine. Obviously, it depends on who you got to drop, but I'm starting Lawrence over Stafford this week. Oh, we already did that one. Flex Olave, Dillon, or Garrett Wilson. That is really tough. Half-point PPR. You know, the problem is, here's a little peek behind the hood. I've got my rankings, right? I do my projections, and then I build my rankings off of that. And I do non-PPR fantasy points and and full PPR fantasy points. Don't actually do half-point PPR fantasy points because I only publish the full PPR. So I don't want to, it's extra work. And I probably should it's all in a spreadsheet so I could actually automate it and just get the half-point PPR ones, but I don't because I'm lazy. There's your peek behind the hood. I think I would go with Dillon in half-point PPR. I do really like Olave and Garrett Wilson. It feels very bad to go away from them, but Dillon's got a really solid passing game role. He's got a really solid running game role. I think week 3 was just a really tough matchup against the Buccaneers. Let's see. Make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you subscribe to the Fantasy Football Today YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe to the Fantasy Football Today newsletter. Could you convince me that I assume Dalvin Cook is a better start than Garrett Wilson and Khalil Herbert? I assume that's Jeff Wilson, probably. Jeff Wilson and Khalil Herbert. Very high re-injury risk. Okay, so the case for Dalvin Cook would be this. Yes, he's dealing with the shoulder injury. That has been a recurring issue for him. And recurring issues are the scariest types of injuries for me because especially if you don't have a surgical procedure to repair them, as we've seen with Dalvin Cook, it's just going to keep happening. He has a shoulder injury pretty much every season at this point. It's like every year going back to college, with the exception of maybe 1 or 2 seasons. He's had some kind of shoulder injury. I'm not sure what it is, why he hasn't had surgery. He's dealing with a torn labrum in his shoulder. It sounds like he's going to play through it. He's going to sling it up. And here's the case for it. The last time he played through a shoulder injury, he missed 1 game, came back the following week, had 27 carries, 207 yards, and 2 touchdowns. It might have actually also been in London. I'm not sure if I'm remembering that correctly. For some reason, that sounds right in my head. But either way, I don't think the geography part of it actually matters. I don't think he's, benefiting from proximity to mainland Europe or anything like that. But just an interesting note, I guess. But yeah, Dalvin Cook, when he's out there, he's a stud. And the re-injury risk is real. But Khalil Herbert, as good as he's looked, he's unproven. He hasn't proven he can handle the week in, week out grind coming off of a big game. I think he's going to be very good. I think he's a top 12 running back. If you wanted to start him over Dalvin Cook, I wouldn't really put too much effort into talking you out of it. Jeff Wilson, I think, is a little iffier because he's going to have to share goal line work, and he doesn't really have a huge passing game role and, all the things that we've always said about the running backs in San Francisco. I think Jeff Wilson's a decent start. He's a top 20 running back, but Dalvin Cook and Khalil Herbert, if Dalvin Cook plays and David Montgomery's out, they're top 12 guys for me. So Cook and Herbert, you could flip a coin on, and whichever one you go with, I think is fine. Gage or Godwin, I would prefer to not use either one of them because if Godwin plays this week, Mike Evans is back. Julio Jones sounds like he's going to play through that knee injury. All of a sudden, Russell Gage has a ton of competition for targets. And as we saw in week 1, he didn't necessarily thrive in that situation. So I would avoid Russell Gage. But then Godwin, I just don't expect him to play a full snap share. We already saw one setback. Is it fair to call that a setback? Torn ACL, first game back, hamstring injury. I think they're probably related, not necessarily like physiologically, because I'm not a doctor. I don't understand how that works, but he'd been practicing for like a week. He hadn't really taken many full practice sessions. Hamstring injuries tend to happen most often early in training camp and then early in the regular season when guys aren't used to the workload. So I do think there is some risk of re-injury with Chris Godwin, enough that between risk of re-injury and not knowing what his role is going to be, I would try to avoid him this week. Carson Wentz at Dallas or Marcus Mariota versus Cleveland. So last week it was let's start Carson Wentz. You can trust him. He's been great against Detroit and whoever else they played. And then he went up against Philadelphia Eagles defense that can rush the passer like crazy, and he got sacked 9 times and looked terrible. Well, Dallas can rush the passer maybe even better than Philadelphia. If you get a chance, I don't know if like someone's got a super cut of Micah Parsons snaps from week 3. I posted one earlier today that just made me laugh. He just ran over the right tackle, I believe, ran through the running back, pushed the running back into Daniel Jones. Micah Parsons is just an absolute freak, and this Dallas Cowboys defense looks really, really good. So I don't feel good trusting Carson Wentz. I would hope I don't have to, but I would start him over Marcus Mariota. Mariota's fine, but Cleveland's got a pretty good defense of their own. Garrett and Clowney being out, that would change things a little bit, but I still don't know if the passing game role is there for Mariota. And as we've seen, the rushing isn't a guarantee every week. Nobody is talking about what Rashad Penny did to Detroit last time. Why not? Well, I'll say this. I don't necessarily care too much about player versus matchup stuff. The thing with Rashad Penny is right now this season he's averaging 4.4 yards per attempt, which is pretty good. Obviously not nearly as good as what he did last season, but like most running backs, 4.4 yards per attempt is pretty good. He's got 141 yards and no touchdowns through 3 games. He's got 4 targets, 3 catches, 10 yards. I just don't think his workload is all that valuable in this Seahawks offense because they just don't run many plays. They don't pick up a lot of first downs. They don't get a lot of goal line opportunities. So you really need Rashad Penny to be incredibly efficient as a runner. That being said, the last time he played Detroit, I was able to filibuster long enough to pull that up. 25 carries, 170 yards, 2 touchdowns. The Seahawks blew the lines out 51-29. And let's see. Here's the thing. Russell Wilson had 4 passing touchdowns in that game, 236 yards on 29 attempts. I just don't think this offense is all that good. And so I think Rashad Penny's in a role where he's getting a decent amount of carries, but not a lot. And I don't know, maybe he'll run for 8 yards per carry and turn 18 carries into whatever that would be, 120 something yards. But if he doesn't get in the end zone, even 120 yards, that's a good game, but it's not a great game because he's not going to catch a lot of passes. So I think the problem with Rashad Penny is just bad offense, bad role is what it comes down to. I'm going to do 3 more questions. So we'll see how long that takes. I can be a little long-winded. Gabe Davis or Drake London in non-PPR. So I did the start-sit questions show with Jamie Eisenberg earlier today, and it became clear that I'm just lower on Gabe Davis than I think most people are. I've got him at 37 at wide receiver, which should be obvious. That's lower than Drake London, who is... Where do I have Drake London ranked? 21st. Riveting television. Drake London 21st. Gabe Davis 37th. What accounts for the difference there? Well, Gabe Davis target share is only like 11%. Now it's only 2 games, and 2 games is too early to derive much meaning from something like target share, but it's not like he hasn't been playing a lot of snaps. His route participation is right up near 100%. I don't think it's quite 100%. He's taken a few plays off each of the first 2 games, but Gabe Davis has been out there a lot, and he's been running wind sprints, as the kids say, because he hasn't been doing much with those routes. Now, week 3, he was dealing with coming off the ankle injury. You can say maybe that explains it, but again, the route participation being what it was. I think the problem is this team has an alpha. Stephon Diggs, there was talk before the season that maybe Gabe Davis was going to compete for targets with Stephon Diggs. He's not. Stephon Diggs is just that good. Like Stephon Diggs is one of the 5 or so best wide receivers in football. He's an incredible player, and Gabe Davis isn't that guy. Gabe Davis is a big play guy. He's a red zone guy. And so he's probably not going to command a ton of targets. There are going to be weeks where he does. There are going to be weeks where he doesn't. But what you're starting Gabe Davis for is the hope of big plays and touchdowns. And that's always iffy, even in a very, very good offense, because the Buffalo Bills, they've got a lot of options. Isaiah McKenzie scored a touchdown last week. Stephon Diggs has 4, I think, of them, 3 or 4. They've thrown to their running backs in the red zone when they've needed to. They've got Dawson Knox, who hasn't scored yet, but has been a very good red zone guy for them in the past. So it's all to say that I think the average Gabe Davis game is probably going to be like 4 or 5 catches, 60-ish yards, and you're hoping for a touchdown. And there are going to be games where he hits on a 50-yard touchdown and has a big game. There's going to be a game where the 50-yard touchdown is a foot out of his hands and he doesn't hit. So I'm trusting Drake London and the role he's locked in so far. Let's see. Would you drop Allen Robinson for Jameson Williams? I already have Michael Pittman, Cortland Sutton, Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, and Treylon Burks. Okay, so you've got 3 must-start wide receivers, I think. Cortland Sutton, Deontay Johnson, Michael Pittman. Pickens and Burks are just flyers. You don't know what you're getting from them. And then that's the same with Jameson Williams, who doesn't sound like he's going to be back in week 5. I haven't really heard any official reports, but the only thing we have heard is I think Mon-Fri St. Brown was on FFT earlier this week, and he said that Jameson Williams hasn't started practicing yet. That makes it unlikely that he's going to be back for week 5. I do want to stash Jameson Williams where I can, but that's only in leagues where I have an IR spot, because it still seems like it's probably multiple weeks away. So I wouldn't drop Allen Robinson for him, even though my expectations for Allen Robinson are pretty muted. I think he's someone who at this point just kind of needs to get in the end zone, or he's not going to be very good. I think the Rams have kind of realized that with the way they're using him, which is use him near the red zone, use him near the goal line, let him win contested balls. He didn't do that last week, and that's why he was disappointing, because he dropped a slant, I believe. But outside of the condensed areas of the field, I'm not sure how valuable he is, because he doesn't gain separation. He's running a lot of yards, but he's someone who has always won on contested catches, and he's a really good player at that, but he's lost a step, I think. And now he's probably like 40 yards and a touchdown. And if you don't get the touchdown, 40 yards is pretty bad. All right, let's get the last question out here, and I will try to make it a good one. Well, Diggs is him. I agree with that. If Leonard Fournette gets hurt, Rashad White could be a league winner, but if Lenny plays, Rashad White ain't blank. Yeah, I agree with that, but I'm not going to have that be the last one. If Tabs didn't suffer that ankle injury, that one wide receiver 1 would be interchangeable between him and Diggs. I guess that's Gabe Davis is who you're referring to. I strongly disagree with that. Yeah, no. Should I see what kind of haul I can get if I put Jamar Chase on the trade block? Higgins hurts his production. So here's the problem, right? 1, he played with T. Higgins last year. So I don't know if that's true. I think the issue is teams are game planning to take away the deep ball against the Bengals, and they're planning on rushing 4 and beating the Bengals that way, and playing on Joe Burrow's willingness to hold on to the ball, try to make plays, and take sacks. The Dolphins blitzed a lot tonight, which they usually do, and the Bengals responded with a game plan that allowed Joe Burrow to get the ball out. You saw a lot of early, short, quick targets. But Jamar Chase can be one of the best wide receivers in football alongside T. Higgins. And we know that because he did it last year. So this is the wrong time to trade Jamar Chase. Unless you think Jamar Chase is just like a 60 yards per game guy moving forward, which I don't personally. I still think he's a top 10 wide receiver, probably top 5 wide receiver. And T. Higgins is really good. There's room for both of them. And so I don't think you trade a guy like Jamar Chase when his value is this low, especially coming off of a Thursday night primetime game that everybody saw he was not great in. 81 yards, 4 catches. That's fine, but it's certainly not great. I think people are going to be down on Ja'Marr Chase, and this is the wrong time to try to trade him. So you're selling at a loss. That's exactly what D Jonesy says. Can't part with Chase at this time. You wait to sell him. Wait till his next monster game. It's coming. Even if teams are taking the deep ball away, Ja'Marr Chase is the kind of guy who can get behind any defense. It hasn't happened consistently yet the way it did last season. And that was part of the knock against Ja'Marr Chase and Joe Burrow this season was they were so dependent on the big play last year. But you got to believe in the talent. You got to believe in the track record. You got to believe in what he showed last year that he can be better than this. And if you do want to trade Ja'Marr Chase, if you are scared of him, that's fine. I'm not, but that's reasonable enough. Wait until he has another big game. Don't do it off of 4 for 81 on a primetime game because this is the lowest his value is likely to be at any point. All right, that's going to do it for the FFT post Thursday Night Football Q&A start sit extravaganza, whatever we're calling this. I don't think we have a name for it. I don't think we will have a name for it. It's just you guys ask me questions and I talk until I go hoarse and then drink a bunch of water after the stream. Thanks for watching. Make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. We'll see you back here on the Fantasy Football Today YouTube channel on Sunday morning at 11:30 a.m. I'll be here. Adam Azer will hopefully be here if he's feeling better. Feel better, Adam. Frank Stanfield will be here. We'll be taking your questions. Hit the like button, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.